Hello and welcome to this edition of the Golf Channel Podcast with Rex and Lav. It is Rocket Mortgage Week. Please contain your excitement, Rex. We just got done recording a roundtable for golf today in which we touched on a number of meaty topics, including Scottie Scheffler's reign of terror and whether any player could unseat him for PGA Tour Player of the Year. Hint, we both said no. We were not talking, however.
No, with an asterisk. I mean, we both have had asterisks on
I mean,
it.
yes, it's going to have to. Xander Schauffele is going to have to do something that rivals what Scottie Scheffler's done over the past 3 months. In other words, it seems very unlikely unless Scottie Scheffler is somehow befallen with some sort of illness or injury. What we did not talk about, this is what I'm trying to get to, was any sort of discussion about what's going on this week at Detroit Golf Club, where a decent field has assembled, highlighted, I would think, by defending champion Rickie Fowler, as well as Tom Kim, last week's playoff loser at the Travelers Championship, as well as 15-year-old Miles Russell. Shout out Jack Beach, who's making his PGA Tour debut and has a lot of people excited about his potential. What has caught your eye this week as we continue our march towards the Open Championship?
Todd Lewis was on Golf Today right before us and did a report on Tom Kim. I did not realize. I think he said this is his 9th consecutive week in a row, which seems counterintuitive to playing your best golf. That's a different conversation, but he certainly has played some pretty good golf. I like the perspective that he brought to the interview with Todd based on what happened on Sunday, where you could probably look at that a lot of different ways. Losing to the world number one by a long shot, Scottie Scheffler, probably is nothing to be ashamed of. However, making bogey on the first playoff hole, most guys are going to take that one a little rough. Didn't look like Tom had spent a lot of time thinking about that. His schedule going forward is interesting. It sounds to me like he's playing the Scottish Open, the Open Championship, going to spend a couple days in Europe before he goes on to Paris and plays the Olympics. And then he plans to come back and play Wyndham. I mean, there's a lot going on in his life right now. And it seems to me he wants to play his best golf. He feels like he's playing his best golf. Sometimes I feel like that's a bit of the tipping point. But I think the story this week is not just Rickie Fowler, but that's an easy starting point because it's getting late early. And that's the old baseball adage. And the idea being that running out of time really, really quickly for those guys to get inside the top 50. And we didn't talk about it on Golf Today. And this was the topic I really wanted to touch on because I kept thinking throughout this entire season, and I'm sure we've discussed the idea that you had to play really, really bad to play your way out of the top 50. And according to the memo that was sent to players last week, right now, you're looking at like a 64% retention rate for players to stay inside the top 50. That means 18 players found a way to play bad enough to play their way out. We're talking about your boy Jordan Spieth. We're talking about Rickie Fowler, who's 91st on the list. We're talking about Cam Davis, Taylor Moore. You keep going down the list. They played bad enough, even with the deck stacked in their favor. And all you have to do is look at how many more points you got in playing in the signature events. There were no cuts by and large. And if there was a cut at the legacy events, it was very, very small. Like, again, you had to play really, really bad not to make it to the weekend. And yet somehow 18 of those guys found a way to do it. And top of that list is Rickie Fowler.
Rickie Fowler has had a hugely disappointing season, basically since this week a year ago. He is 163rd on the PGA Tour this year in strokes gained total. In other words, he is not doing any facet of the game particularly well. It does make for an interesting scenario, Rex, because let's say Rickie Fowler does not get inside the top 50 and is not eligible next year for those signature events in 2025. There has been so much complaining on social media and on Golf Today by our colleague Eamon Lynch about the number of sponsor exemptions that have been doled out to the likes of Adam Scott and Webb Simpson, clearly by virtue of their position on the PGA Tour policy board. You have to think that Rickie Fowler, if he does not get inside the top 50, would get a sponsor exemption into almost all of them based on the popularity, based on how much the tournament directors would want him in the field. Again, he has the credentials to warrant a spot. He's a 6-time winner on the PGA Tour, former Players Champion, a hugely marketable presence, and has done a lot to give back to the PGA Tour. But that, I think, even underscores the need, if you're the PGA Tour, when you look at some of these marquee names outside, to probably put a cap on the number of sponsor invites that these players are going to get into special exemptions, because you're going to hear a lot of kvetching if that's not the case.
Well, and to be fair, Ricky's not on the board. So it's not as though he's going to get thrown in the same category as Webb Simpson and Adam Scott and maybe some of these other players who have scooped up these exemptions. However, to your point, he's also really, really popular. So I'm not going to maybe Eamon, because that's what Eamon likes to do best is complain in these situations. But I'm not quite sure that you'll find a tournament director that would say, no, I don't want Ricky in my field. Ha! Forget about Ricky Fowler. No, because you're going to sell hats and you're going to get 40-something-year-old men who look creepy in those big orange bucket hats of his, but they're still going to wear it. He's still popular, even though he's not playing his best golf. So I don't think that's necessarily going to be an issue. My bigger issue, and again, this goes to the idea that mathematically, it seems really, really difficult to play your way out of that top 50. You, in my mind, you only had to play average. I think the stat that I used at the beginning of this season, if you finished up the season inside, if you're inside the top 50 and you played this year's signature events and you finished on average, I think the number I used was tied for 15th. And if you weren't in those signature events and you played pretty much every other full field event and you finished tied for 15th, one of those players lost their PGA Tour card, which means they finished outside the top 125, and the other stayed inside the top 50. I'll give you an idea of which one they are. I don't think I need to explain it any further. I think the math in this is leaning so far in those players' favor that when you look now that there's 18 guys, Ricky Fowler being the highlight of that, certainly Jordan Spieth is right there as well. It's almost stunning to me when you look at the seasons they've had, because now you can quantify exactly how bad they are.
Yeah, like I think we know now, sitting here in late June, just how hugely important it is to a player's schedule to get inside those signature events. Now, you still have to perform, but for the amount of available points in those events, like it makes it so much more likely that you'd be able to either retain a PGA Tour card first and foremost, but almost get back into the signature events for the following season. Our colleague, Brentley Romine, had a perfect example in which Ricky Fowler is 90th in FedExCup points, has been playing in events that were valued at 11,100. That's the amount of points that had been available to him in 17 starts so far this season. Pearson Coody, who is a top player coming off the Korn Ferry Tour, in other words, he has priority access into these events, has played 15 times, but for just 6,800 points available. Essentially, 4,000 to 5,000 points more just for getting in that. Again, you have to perform. Ricky Fowler has not performed, and that's why he is in the position he is now. But I'm with you. It does make for very interesting talking points for the remainder of the season. You look at some of the other players, Rex, who are outside that top 50 right now as we get sort of this last chunk of the FedExCup season. Jordan Spieth is 53rd. Min-Woo Lee was on Golf Today on Tuesday. Not necessarily complaining, but more annoyed by the fact that he's played just 11 PGA Tour events this season, only once in a signature event. You would think as a very marketable, personable 25-year-old, that's exactly the kind of player that the PGA Tour should be wanting to promote, should be wanting to sort of have an avenue for upward mobility. That has not been the case despite Min-Woo Lee just missing one cut this season. He's 64th in the rankings, and Adam Scott, despite those free passes in the signature events, is 67th in the rankings. What else this week, Rex? What else, as it relates to the Rocket Mortgage, has caught your eye?
Well, and before we set sail on this number, because the top 50 is going to be a hard ceiling here, really coming up really quick for a lot of different players. And to be fair, Nick Dunlap did not finish last season inside the top 50, but you and I had a very, very long conversation after he won the American Express about him leaving Alabama, him leaving college, turning pro after that. I think I was wholeheartedly, full-throated, leaned into it, put bass in my voice, and said that absolutely 100% he should turn pro. It would have been a different conversation 5 years ago. I probably would have been a little bit more understanding of the idea that, okay, maybe he does need to go back for one more year of college and enjoy himself. There's no reason to grow old faster than you need to. However, this season offered so many opportunities for him, quote unquote opportunities for him, because that victory at the American Express gave him access into all of the signature events. He now had access to what Brentley did a really good job at the math, pointing out that you have such an advantage being in those events this year more than any other event in the history of the PGA Tour. Of course, he has to take advantage of it. But now, in retrospect, I'm going to give you your avenue. I'm going to give you your flowers and the microphone, because now he is outside that number and is probably going to scramble to keep his card.
Well, no, he's certainly going to have his card because he has a 2-year
Well,
exemption.
because he has a 2-year exemption, but
Yeah,
you know what I
by
mean.
virtue of winning. But he will not be in the signature events, barring something unlikely here over these last 8 or so events. He's currently 93rd in the FedEx Cup standings. Again, that's not to say that he made the wrong decision. I think it was more of a social aspect of why I thought that he should have stayed in school until after the NCAA championships, as opposed to sort of the practical realities of his profession, where of course you had to try and take advantage. Of course you had to try and parlay that into a better world ranking, into a better FedEx Cup position by the end of the year. That would make your 2025 even easier. Again, he now has at least the runway to settle into professional life. He would be the first to admit it has been a little bit rocky. He would be the first to admit that he still has some sort of guilt in leaving some of his Alabama teammates behind, and is sort of stuck in between two lives of being what should be a rising college junior and now a rookie on the PGA Tour. But yeah, his 2025 is going to look a lot different at this point. The discussion I want to get into, Rex, which is probably a little bit of a complicated one, is this is a very slow time on the PGA Tour schedule. You have to be a diehard golf fan to be paying attention to the Rocket Mortgage Classic, as well as next week's John Deere Classic, even though Jordan Spieth is going to be in the field. Is this just the reality of the PGA Tour, that there are going to be sort of ebbs and flows in the schedule, or can there be something done if they're sort of reinventing what the PGA Tour is going to look like? Can something be done that sort of reinvigorates what can be these dog days of summer?
No, and to be fair, it's the dog days of summer for sports. I mean, what are we looking forward to over the next few weeks, just in sports period? Let's take
Literally, baseball is the only thing that's on.
hot
That's
dog
that.
eating contest, like the Olympics. So, of course, we're gearing up towards that. We're inching towards the Olympics, but we have hot dog eating contest and baseball, which my Orioles are playing very, very well. I'm going to pay attention to them, certainly. However, I just think, to your point, and I think we talked about this last week, I had a conversation at the U.S. Open about the idea with a player director on the policy board of, if I gave you a blank sheet of paper and like, look, give me your best 20 events. And I think that's what you're getting to right now. Something closer to, instead of having these dog days, let's just create a schedule where maybe it's a week on, week off, because we just talked about this on Golf Today. What we just experienced from a top player's perspective over the last 3 weeks with the Memorial, which was brutally hard, U.S. Open, which was brutally hard, the Travelers Championship, not necessarily brutally hard, but brutally hot. And what we forced the top players to do is to play 3 weeks in a row. And outside of Tom Kim, that's not a recipe for success for the game's top players. There's a reason why Tiger Woods never played more than 14, 15 times in a season, because he knew to play his absolute best, not only did his game have to be sort of in shape and he needed the quote unquote reps, but his body also had to be in shape. And we're forcing these players into positions where the last 3 weeks, what we saw coming down the stretch, and I think we touched on this on Sunday night, was a gassed Scotty Scheffler. He was exhausted. Now, maybe that had something to do with the idea that he had Tom Kim pushing him all day long at the Travelers Championship, trying to get that 6th win. But I think the other half of it is, you cannot dismiss how difficult these last few weeks are. So the answer to your question is yes. If I gave you a blank sheet of paper and told you to come up with a 20-event tour schedule, we could do something really, really cool. I just don't think we're quite there yet.
I just think there's too many down periods in the PGA Tour schedule. Like we just talked about on Golf Today, but you start with all this momentum of either the tournament winners or the top 50 in the signature events, playing at Kapalua. Everyone's excited, even though it's football season. Like the vistas are amazing. You've been starved for elite PGA Tour competition for what had been probably 3 or 4 months by that point. And then you basically disappear for 3 or 4 weeks until you get to the next signature event. I don't like the sort of the 3-week gap between the Players Championship until the Masters. It ends up being 4 weeks with the 3 events that are in between there. There's a lull after the Masters. There's a lull now heading into the Open Championship. There has to be a way, and if the PGA Tour is going to all of a sudden be in the money-making business with very smart business people who are trying to turn a profit here, I think one possibility to throw out an option, Rex, actually I've got 2 of them. One of the options is to do a month-long UK swing. Again, you would need to build in probably another week of rest. So I would have this week off as well. But I'd love to see like a British Masters leading into the Irish, leading into the Scottish, leading into the Open Championship. Maybe 4 is too much. A lot of players talk about sort of peaking on that third week of 3 in a row, assuming that the conditions or the golf courses are not taxing them all that much. That's one option that I'd love to see that would sort of spread the gospel across the globe as well. But another one, Rex, that I'd love to see if the timing could be right and you're trying to make the PGA Tour as competitive and as cutthroat a place as possible. I'd love to see either springtime or summertime promotion and relegation. I'd love to see like a Tim Veeding or a Harry Higgs, right, who have been mopping up on the Korn Ferry Tour this season. I'd love to see them automatically promoted to the PGA Tour. I'd love to see the cellar dwellers and the FedExCup standings, those who are outside, let's call it the top 100 at a certain mark of the season. You're gone. You had half a season. We need to get some fresh blood in there. I don't think they're going to do that because even though they now are in the money-making business, this is still a member-run organizations for the members by the members, and they would probably be disincentivized to limit the number of playing opportunities or basically cut your PGA Tour card in half. But I think that could add a lot of juice to the late spring, early summer that's sort of lacking on the PGA Tour.
As much as I enjoy your made up sound effects, and I do miss them. It's been a minute since yep, there it is. Appreciate that. I think we already have sort of that immediate promotion from or relegation, however you want to put it. If Harry Higgs wins 3 times, he gets promoted to the PGA Tour. We have that.
It's happened like 10 times in history.
Yeah, it's not easy. There's a reason why you get such a runway to the PGA Tour. It's because it's really, really hard to do. So that's kind of the point of this. No, I mean, I think season-long promotion and relegation is the long-term answer here, and whatever that's going to look like. And then it goes back to the idea that maybe 20 is not the right number. Maybe you want 25, maybe you want 15, whatever the case it may be. It's not going to be 15 events, 15 consecutive weeks or 20 consecutive weeks on the road. You, by nature, have to have built-in sort of rest periods for these players. And maybe you have events in between that are on the secondary tour, or maybe you don't. But I don't know what you're actually kind of pushing for here, because the idea that
I'm pushing for more drama throughout the season as opposed to having these lulls.
I mean, you're just not going to get it because
Why?
I think we can all agree the number is 20 or 25.
Why can't I have
events. Well, because they're not going to play more than 20 or 25 events. So at max, you're going to have
the top players. You're talking about the top players.
Yes.
Why not
I don't
make
know what else you're looking for.
How about an in-season tournament? You're an NBA fan. The Lakers didn't get anything for their in-season title in 2023.
They got a banner. No, they hung a banner. They 100% hung a banner.
But that's about it. But why not have a 1 to 2 week tournament where the cellar dwellers on the current PGA Tour season and the top performers on the Korn Ferry Tour, they play 72, 108 holes, whatever you want to do. Whoever gets in there in top 5s, those are the players that keep their card. Regardless of what they've done, regardless of what they're doing, regardless of what they would do the rest of the season, their status is secure for 2025. Who says no? That would add some spice and some drama without taxing the top players, which is clearly one of your chief concerns.
Well, it is a concern because they're just not going to play more than 20, 25 weeks over the course of the year. And I will go back to the idea that let's say you do. I don't have a blank piece of paper for a prop here, but let's say you did have a blank piece of paper that didn't have writing on it here, and you started scribbling down notes, 20 events, and you're going to have to build in those weeks, which are now full field weeks. And there is a universe where those off weeks are going to be live events or DP World Tour events because they're going to be part of this enterprise. So it's not as though we're just going to break away from the idea that there's not going to be golf every week, because I think that's your primary concern, because I've heard you say it time and time and time again. It's one of your old notes, and you always go back to the oldies and the goodies, that you don't like the idea that you have 48 events over the course of a season and that we're never put in a position where we miss it. Baseball.
Scarcity is something the PGA Tour does not do well.
They do not. And there's a reason behind that. And we've addressed this before as well, because if you're a business and if you have a company that wants to do business with you on this particular week, and let's call it the last week of November, and you're RSM and you want to be in the PGA Tour business, I don't know of any business that's going to turn down money, essentially, is what you're telling them to do. No, thank you. We don't want your money. we don't want to hold an event that week because we want to make it more special when we show up at the Century in Hawaii on the first week of January. I get where you're coming from. I'm a baseball fan. No one looks forward to spring training more than me because hope springs eternal. And it's your one time of year outside of this year that I've had to look forward to and be like, oh yeah, this is the year it's going to happen. I'm just not quite sure if we're ever going to end up with a golf calendar that doesn't have some sort of competition almost every week out of the year. Because one, you have the players for it, maybe not the top players, but you certainly have enough players to fill that calendar. And two, you have enough businesses that want to be in the PGA Tour, be in the professional golf business over the course of 52 weeks. It's just not going away.
I think, first of all, you're letting all the air out of my balloon, and I don't appreciate it. And I hope that people just savage you in the comments for it. I think now more than ever, players are coming to grips with the idea that they are entertainers, or at least they need to be entertainers. And there are certain things that the PGA Tour can do to spruce up the week in and week out monotony of the PGA Tour. Again, I'd love to see a sort of skills competition at Kapalua. I think that could be a fun change. I'd love to see some sort of all-star break, promotion relegation event in the summer. I'd love to see a fall that's dominated by live and team golf and match play. Like, I think that would be a lot of fun as well. They just have to get more creative than they have done. The PGA Tour thought that they were going to be sort of reimagining. I remember the phrase, they're reimagining their 2024 PGA Tour schedule. It looks the same basically as what it always does. Now it just has events that have 70 players and the best fields, and those that do not, with this sort of cadence that probably did not work in 2024. I want to see them get very creative as it relates to the schedule moving forward. Again, probably can't happen for 2025, but I'm a dreamer. I'm an idea guy, and I happen to have a lot of them. We were trying to keep this podcast, Rex, to about 25 minutes, and I had written down some notes.
Well, before you get to those notes, because I know where you're going with this, and I don't feel like going down that silly road quite yet, because I do want to touch on this, because I'm going to let that go, because I don't want to add any more to the Rex and Lab don't like each other beef. That's clearly, you guys are just trolling us now. That's what you have to be.
They have to be. Like, I literally talked about this on the last week's podcast, and yet the commenter still said you guys clearly have disdain for each other.
You did bring up one, and you're probably not going to be happy I did this. So this is our text thread with Lil Russ, and you brought this up. I think it was yesterday or the day before. Do we think that TGL is going to work /last? And this goes to the conversation that we're having right now, because I do think TGL, or a version of TGL, is going to be part of the future. It's going to be part of PGA Tour Enterprises. I think it's going to be part of how we work live into PGA Tour Enterprises. It's going to be how we work team golf into it. And I think my only reply, because I was really busy yesterday with a lot going on with doctors, my only reply was they have financial backing. I mean, you don't have to do too many Google searches to see how many people.
$500 million.
There's a lot of deep pockets who really, really like the concept. There's a lot of top players, almost all of the top players, at least those who stayed on the PGA Tour, didn't join Live Golf, are behind it. And you also have networks behind it, ESPN. And so I don't know how it doesn't work, I think was my response to you. And no, I don't know that fans are going to love the concept. And I think it might take a while to grow on you. To your point, I think the players, more than anything, are going to have to understand that this is entertainment, that this is not your normal march down the fairways with the blinders on and don't make eye contact with anybody around and keep quiet and just try to do your business as best you can. I want to see performative. I want to see the song and the dance, and you guys are on a stage and you need to make me laugh, because that's why I'm tuning in on a Monday night. So my argument was, yes, I think it is, but I don't think you ever actually responded.
No, I think my hesitancy would be, it feels like we're oversaturating the market with golf. When viewership numbers are what they are, there was a lot of hand-wringing earlier this year about whether golf fans are turned off by the divide that we've experienced. But all of a sudden, you have these signature events on the PGA Tour. You have sort of this world tour concept that's circling, and now all of a sudden, you're going to have 25 to 32-year-old Americans who have traditionally stayed home. All of a sudden, they're going to be traversing the globe, and that's going to take sort of some getting used to it, also a toll on their bodies as well. You have Live Golf, which is going to be somehow incorporated in the PGA Tour schedule. You always have the Cup at the end of the year. It just seems like a lot of golf and a lot of concepts. It seems like they're throwing, a lot of ideas against the wall and seeing what sticks. Again, it's not my cup of tea, TGL. I may eventually get into it. I sort of need to see it before I could believe it. And you and I will both be down in the South Florida Dome to do some preview podcasts down there in advance of the season opener in 2025. But I just think, boy, that seems like a lot of stuff that's going on when there's also, I think, a lot of apathy towards the professional product given the current environment.
Okay, you can do the song and dance now. I mean, you can do the hijinks now.
Okay, perfect. Mentioned on the Sunday podcast, or at least not mentioned, was that you have been in doctor's office. It was actually a close call today whether you're going to be available in time for our Golf Today hit, because you were seeing yet another orthopedic surgeon. But Rex, you have a torn meniscus in one of your knees. You just turned 57, and yet you sent video of you wakeboarding. How does this compute? Again, you tore your meniscus not by playing pickleball, but by reaching down to get a pickleball during a pickleball game. There is a clear delineation that we need to make. How are you still upright, and what is the sort of the prognosis for your eventual recovery?
Wake surfing is one of the things I do that I enjoy the most. And every year, Bunkmate and I have the annual argument, and we're sneaking up on it because usually it happens towards the end of the summer, because I want a boat, because this is what I want to do. The height of entertainment here. Yes, you're going to play the video on your thing. Yeah, that's me. Just a couple of days ago, as a matter of fact. But luckily, I have friends who own boats, and we live on a lake. So that's Lake Brantley in Central Florida. So I had a friend that called me. I had not done that since I tore the meniscus in my knee. Ooh, hard, went down hard. And so he called me, and he just wanted to go out Saturday. I believe it was Saturday afternoon. And we did. And I explained the situation, and I said, we'll start slow and we'll see how it feels. Because of, I guess, the nature of the tear or the stability of the knee, whatever the case may be, you can tell by that clearly that does not impact my knee at all. I will say this, though. The very next day on Sunday, my youngest son walked by as I was working out, and I was doing some lateral movement stuff. And he opened the door shaking his head with the same look in his eyes that you have in your eyes right now. Just pure disappointment and confusion. And I don't understand why my dad is so stupid. Why are you doing this? You have a torn meniscus. And to his point, I woke up the next day and could barely walk. So the update is I have to have an MRI. I'm getting the MRI the day before I leave to the Scottish. So I think it's July 6th. And then I'll meet with the surgeon. And I'm just going to have to get it operated on.
It isn't just the injury that was sort of.
You're afraid of the water too. That's your part.
Quick Google search: 7 Florida lakes among America's most alligator-infested lakes, and you can believe that Lake Brantley was among those top 7. So not only do you not have the physical capability to get back to kick and to swim and to get back on the boat to safety, you are literally swimming with gators, not sharks, but gators, who would make a torn meniscus in your knee one of the least of your concerns. You have a family, people who care about you, colleagues who are depending on you, and yet you're taking your life into your own hands and swimming in gator infested waters. What do you say to that?
Well, and I tried to explain to you, and you didn't want to have this conversation either. All right, let's do 26 in a row. I just did a really quick Google search that it's either this or surfing. And I've decided not to surf until I do get my knee fixed. And you only have to look at the news very, very quickly. Like I see Lake George in Seminole County. I see Lake Jessup. Hold on, I'll keep looking. I've decided that I'm going to go ahead and not go surfing. Lake Brantley is not on this list. You lied to me. So no, it's not. Yeah, I'm not afraid of going in lakes. I've done it my entire life. I've lived in Florida. I've surfed my entire life. And yes, there are things in there that could hurt you. And there's things in there that you should probably stay away from. But by 57 years old, I'm not quite sure if sitting on the bank wishing I could do these things is the way I want to live my life.
Lake Jessup, home to about 13,000 alligators. If ever you
I used to live on Lake Jessup when I was in college, actually, and we would go swimming in that lake. And I can attest that is an alligator-infested lake. That is a true story right there.
There you go. Just playing with fire, living dangerously ever since you were a young squire. Somehow, folks, we squeezed 30 minutes out of this week's happenings in this Golf Channel podcast with Rex and Lav. We will be back on Sunday night for a full recap of the Rocket Mortgage Classic, as well as anything else that happens in the intervening time. Go to golfchannel.com/golf for our latest news, notes, and updates. Thanks for listening. Thanks for the support. We'll talk to you guys on Sunday night.
golfchannel.com/golf.
Nope. NBC
You just
Sports.com.
got caught right. Yep. You just got caught in the air and couldn't do it. Didn't know who to pass the ball to.